And we're back.
Can you wait until I sit down until you say that so it's not just a
Well, it's awkward because
nostril
we're
shot?
not talking at all while you're sitting
I'll
down.
crop it out.
Are you ready? You good?
Hold on.
And we're back.
Let me twist my hair one more time before I do it on camera like a freaking
We could
idiot.
crop this out, but I prefer us not to.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to talk about food portions and portion size per meal a little bit today, and we'll get this question from clients a lot. And it's typically, I guess, an avenue that we don't necessarily want to go down first because it's a little bit more in depth, it's a little bit more complex, and then you start talking about things in which you're asking someone to change multiple behaviors at once, which sometimes is just a little bit too much for clients to follow.
Mm-hmm.
So some of this stuff is potentially a lot to ask of a client to perform, but the question comes in so frequently that I think it's important that we address it. So we're going to talk about
Basically.
if you're eating 3 meals a day and you have a caloric allowance of whatever it is, how many calories should you have per meal? Can you include a snack and stay in a deficit? What should those meals kind of look like? And just give a roundabout as to what's happening in those scenarios, because I think a lot of times the clients will come up to us and say, well, I'm eating this, this, and this. And they'll potentially be foods that we would consider to be good, like, oh, you're having chicken, you're having a sweet potato, you're having like general like bodybuilding based foods like that I feel like bodybuilding kind of popularized the whole chicken or steak and eggs and the carbohydrate being brown rice
Broccoli.
and sweet potatoes and broccoli, exactly. So along those lines, if you're gonna have these amount of calories in a day, how many calories should you have in each meal, depending on how many meals we're having, and then what does that kind of look like, and are you abiding by that on a per meal basis? Because I think that's when we kind of get lost, is like, am I having this amount of food? Is it the right amount? Is it the right food volume and stuff like that? So, let's use me for an example, and let's say that I want to eat 3,000 calories a day, and I want to eat 3 meals per day.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you advise for me on a daily basis? I'm really comfortable eating 3 times a day and 3,000 calories. If I'm over 3,000, we're assuming I'll gain weight. If we're under 3,000, I'll lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to lose weight. I want to get down to 140 pounds. I'm only 60 pounds away. Let's go.
Okay, so, well, the typical answer is, well, it depends, right? So there's a lot of different variables that you need to consider. Do you work out? How often do you work out? How long do you work out for? What kind of workouts do you do? Do you strength train versus doing cardio? Are you a cardio bunny?
Big time.
Are you hungry in the morning? Do you prefer to eat more food at night? Everybody's very different, which is why a lot of times when I get these questions from people like, oh, do you do meal plans? And I'm like, no. Because if I were to tell you to eat A, B, and C, and you were like, ew, I hate B and C,
exactly.
like that would suck. So we really do take an individualized approach to try and help people with what's going to be specifically helpful to them. So I think if you were someone that had steady hunger levels, which isn't super common, you just split it up and say 1,000 calories a meal. You know what I mean? And I think something to consider is making sure that you have protein at every meal, like 25 grams. If you're throwing in snacks, try to get maybe 10 grams in each snack. I think that's probably the most important thing to focus on besides calories, especially for those of you who don't count calories or track anything. But I thought it would be best to just go by some very basic portion sizes. I'm not a huge fan of doing this. I think it's one of the tools in the toolbox, but I do think that it applies to everyone that isn't counting their calories or tracking their macros. So something to consider, this is kind of precision nutrition's ideas. I'm not a precision nutrition person, but it's pretty common. So let's talk about, protein sizes, right? Usually a serving size is like 3 to 4 ounces, which is like the size of the palm of your hand. So something to consider. Usually they suggest that women have 1 portion, men have 2 portions, and that would be usually appropriate for each person. Because obviously hand size varies. If you're a bigger person, you're going to have a bigger hand, which means that you'll have potentially a higher calorie goal depending on what your goals are. Clenched fist is about a cup. The front of a closed fist is about a half a cup. So something to consider when you're looking at like carbohydrates, rice, potatoes, pasta, things like that. Thumb is about 2 tablespoons, right? That's not a lot, right? A thumb full of peanut butter is 200 calories. A fingertip is about a teaspoon, so something to consider. I'm having a woman who's having a little bit of trouble losing weight, so I had her, take pictures of her food and send me what were the approximate portion sizes, and she said like she had a tablespoon of yogurt, and it was definitely more than a tablespoon. So, I think that using these things could be very, very helpful. Again, if you're not like weighing your food. I do think that weighing your food can be really educational. It's not something that I suggest to do for a lifetime. What kind of a crazy person would do that forever? But I do think if you do that for a couple weeks and you weigh out what your food is and then compare it to the size of your hand, you're going to get a really good understanding of how much you're eating. And again, it's just kind of a short-term educational tool in the toolbox, right? Just like using the size of your hand. But I think food scales can help. I think this is easy because you're not carrying around a food scale. And the reality is that you don't need to be perfect with all that. I mean, they're kind of measurements. If you're using this as your guide, right, and you're still not losing weight, then you need to go a little less. I mean, that's pretty much the general idea. Something else to consider is, how is the food prepared? Is the chicken that you're eating pan-fried in olive oil? Is it baked? Is it grilled?
That's huge.
Yeah, is it breaded? Huge. Is it, marinated in something creamy or whatever? Some people base their chicken in mayonnaise, I've heard of.
I'm not surprised.
I bet it probably comes out really good.
Plenty of people said, I had chicken for dinner. Tell me more about this chicken. And then 4, 5, 6 sentences later, like, okay, well, that wasn't necessarily like grilled chicken that you think you're having, like, 4 ounces of chicken breast, with like a little bit of spice on it.
Right.
You actually probably added another 50% of calories worth of additional stuff outside of just the chicken, based on the additives that you threw in there, including potentially olive oil as the,
Sure, yeah. 2 tablespoons of olive oil is like 200 calories, 13-ish grams of fat. So that adds up really, really quickly. And if you're adding that to vegetables even that you're cooking, if you're sauteing instead of steaming, that again, you can take something that would be relatively low calorie and high volume with just steaming vegetables. But then if you're sauteing it with a couple tablespoons of olive oil, remember, this is like 2 tablespoons. Most people really put it in the pan. So that could be 400 calories of just olive oil right there. So all things that you need to be mindful of. If you're not losing weight, like, you really have to reevaluate what you're doing, your cooking methods, and then try to do something that you've never done before, because that might be how you become successful. Something else to consider too is not even just how you're preparing the food, but the actual cuts of meat, right? So, 4 ounces of, just my palm, I'm holding up my hand, but I just mean my palm. So 4 ounces of, a chicken breast is going to be like 120 calories, not a lot of dietary fat, maybe 25-ish grams of protein. But then if you have something like 4 ounces of a ribeye, which has a lot more fat in it, you're looking at, 350 calories. And what was it,
31
grams of fat, 18 grams of protein. So it's a massive difference. So this doesn't always work. A food scale doesn't always work. That's not for everybody. But there's a lot of things to consider. We also like to talk about when it comes to like snacks and stuff, right? So we're bringing these back out from our last video, right? How easy is it to eat these 6 Reese cups? Really easy, right? And this is 300 to 400 calories. I'm not even exactly.
1 minute. This would take me 1 minute. We should actually do that on the video. See how many calories I can consume in 3 minutes.
We got time.
That needs its own video by itself. But yeah, and I don't want to consume all 6 of these right now.
We still have to have our eating competition.
That's right.
Yeah. So yeah, really easy to eat in a minute, 400 calories, right? And then you have something like a tangerine, and this is an effort barrier, we call it, right? You got to peel it. You got to take off all the little, white parts that taste really pithy. And it would take a long time to eat 4 tangerines, and this is maybe 150 calories. So this is an effort barrier. Having things like nuts inside of their shells is an effort barrier because it takes time to
Sure.
take the pistachios out or
I will
crack
say,
the peanuts.
I don't care if you wrap this thing up 10 times. I'll get to it. You make this as challenging as you want to get to. I'll find a way to
Now
get to
I
this
need
Reese's.
But yeah, I mean, we can sit here on camera and eat our Reese cups, but I'm not going to sit here and peel a tangerine. It takes a lot more effort. But these are the kind of snacks that you want to have in front of you.
Sure.
And then you'll know if you're really going to want something, it's going to take some effort. You're going to undereat more than one bite of a Reese cup. So just something else to consider. These things, just keep them out of your sight if you have a hard time resisting them.
Big time. Yeah,
Mhm.
that would definitely be me. So let's say we're dealing with someone that they're under the impression they're eating 500 calories per meal, and irrelevant to the amount of meals that they have or the amount of calories that they're allowed to eat throughout the day. Let's say they're having a 500 calorie meal. What would you want a 500-ish calorie meal to look like for a client? And we'll just say, like, let's use even percentages, I guess, for proteins, carbs, and fats. What roundabout do you think that would look like? Or if you want to change the percentages of how you want that to look. Maybe 40% protein or something.
Well, as we discussed before, protein's really satiating, right? Oh, I can't put my knee up like that. That looks really unprofessional. Protein's really satiating. I prefer a higher protein diet because I think there's a lot of benefits to it. But, you know, the average person, if they're in a fat loss phase, I would say probably prioritize protein a little bit more. Get that in like the 30 percentile range. Fat 20, carb 50. It's personal preference, right?
Sure.
I'm not a big carb person, even though I just housed that that Reese cup, but I actually prefer to have more protein. So I, like a weirdo, probably like 40 to 50% protein in most of my meals.
Sure.
So that's going to depend too, but.
Yeah, if you were to say 30% protein of a 500 calorie meal, now we're talking about 150 calories worth of protein, which gets you a little over 30 grams of protein for that meal, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 35 or so. A little over that, maybe 37.5.
You're good at math. Like
37.5. I was the actual, I've bragged about this many times to my clients, but we used to do around the world. We had 28 kids in our second grade class, and I beat all 27 kids, go around the world, beat every single one in mental math flashcards.
Oh.
Come back, beat all 27 again. I did that for 5 straight weeks.
Wow.
So 54-0 for 5 straight weeks.
He's not as dumb as he looks.
Equals 270? 270?
No,
270-0. There was a girl named Sherry that beat me, that broke that streak. But yeah, third grade I went on a similar run as well, but that was with multiplication up to 12.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, going back to our discussion, I don't mean to brag or anything.
Sure. So modest.
So we're talking about about 35 to 37 grams of protein in a 500 calorie meal. That sounds like a decent amount of food. 37 grams of protein. That's what would you say? That's 5, 6, maybe even 7 ounces of a lean meat.
Sure. Yeah.
So that sounds like a really good way to start a meal. And then we have another 350 calories to play with, in which, kind of break it up however you want in terms of carbs and fats maybe.
Yeah, have some vegetables, right?
Sure.
If fat loss is your goal, I want you to prioritize your protein and vegetables. Like, they should be in every meal, on every plate, and potentially be your snack sources as well. Fiber, protein, good stuff. And when you fill up on things like that, you're less likely to fill up on the Reese cups or the less desirable options that are easy to overeat.
Sure. Now, how quickly can we get to 500 calories if we had a dinner based around pasta and let's throw in a glass of wine?
Oh my God, it is like no pasta. What is that, a cup of cooked pasta, which is like nothing. That's 200 calories. That's not even including any sauce or olive oil.
1 cup. One cup?
What?
Would this be
Yeah, this was about the size of 1 cup of cooked pasta.
And that's what everyone eats, right? When they have pasta, no more than this.
Like 5 or 6 times that. Throw in a glass of wine, forget about it. That's you're looking at 1,000 calories easily for that meal.
Right there.
Easily.
Yeah. And significantly less bites.
Even if you're getting something like a pasta primavera, right, which is a lot of vegetables, like that's good stuff because there's vitamins and minerals in the vegetables that are in there, but it's still loaded up with the olive oil, so you got 400 or 500, especially if you're getting it at a restaurant, 400 or 500 calories just from olive oil.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and when I just wanted to wrap it up. When it comes to looking at some of these meals,
We blew past 15 minutes.
did we?
Damn it. Go!
Oh no. Oh wait, but we're cutting out the beginning.
Okay.
So to summarize everything, we want our protein sources to play a role in our meal. That'll be way more satiating.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get more bites, which I think is really important. And it's really quick to get the 500 calories worth of in a meal if it's based around carbohydrates and fats versus protein.
Sure.
Awesome.
500 calories right here.
Boom.